move down the list. If you take care of what the school needs, eventually it will trickle down to all of the other communities and all the other people involved in this process. We want to make decisions that provide the best education possible for the students of East Mills, and we want to ensure the long-term fiscal viability and responsibility of the school district in this process. Our process, you've heard me say this over and over. If you've been to the meetings, if you've watched them online, it's where are we now, where do we want to be, how do we get there? So we've done the where are we now piece. We've analyzed your existing buildings. We've done the walkthroughs, the 3D scans. We've talked to administration, your maintenance staff, reviewed drawings for projects, dug up all the history on the buildings. Our engineers have done reports to show what the lifespan is on systems in your buildings, roofing, all of those components in your building, and what you may have to expect over a course of, say, 10 years that you're going to have to input into these buildings. That's the where are we now. The where we want to be piece, that's where we are at currently with you guys. That's the ideas to stimulate discussion. What are the needs versus the wants? What are the priorities? How do we move forward with a community-based solution? And that's a process that we have a meeting, we give you ideas, you get feedback, we continue to do that, to a point where we start to focus in on some pieces and can hopefully have a solution that is a consensus amongst the community, that a facilities committee making a recommendation to a school board, that everybody can be confident that that is a solution that is going to move forward. The how do we get there piece, that is a component of a master plan. So we may have some ideas and goals here that can't be implemented in a matter of a couple of years. There may be things that the long-term goal or the long-term thinking is one particular solution, but we have to take steps to get there. Or we may want to have an option where we can decide in 20 years, what we want for a different direction. Let's say the county continues to grow in population. Omaha's predictions of having more jobs than housing available by 2030, all of that comes true, and there's natural growth that happens in this direction. How can we make sure that we plan for that? So that's on the how do we get there piece. So the where are we now? There's 8 steps that we've gone through. I mentioned the facilities assessment. What we look at, that also includes code-related issues, handicap accessibility, life safety, so fire alarm, fire sprinklers, FEMA, tornado shelters. We look at comparable school districts, operational deficiencies. You have multiple campuses amongst multiple communities. That just puts you at an operational deficiency against other school districts that are all in one community or all in one building. I'm not saying that's good or bad for your community. That's just something to look at and be aware of moving forward. We want to educate a diverse community committee. So there is a facilities committee that takes a lot of the feedback, sees some of the survey results, helps formulate ideas, says maybe we need to address this particular issue, or what do we need to do to get this cross section of the community involved. So hopefully we've got a pretty good cross section of the different communities and people representing the school district and the communities here tonight. We've created these ideas. So in green, we're in the piece where we're creating ideas, bringing them to you, refining those ideas, bringing them back to you, refining them again, and continuing to bring them back until we have something that we think everybody can buy into moving forward. We're also looking at sources and uses of funding. So again, that's why Matt Gillespie is here tonight. He's going to really dive into a couple of the scenarios and what that may mean to you as a taxpayer on paying for any of these projects or ideas that we have here. I mentioned creating a master plan. Again, that's something that a facilities committee will make a recommendation to a school board, and hopefully that school board will adopt that plan. And that also includes how you go about paying for things or implementing those pieces to get to that point. So just to recap a little bit on the where are we now piece, the East Mills Elementary School, where we're here at tonight, 73,000 square feet, built around 1962 with an addition in 2005. We went through and identified a number of items that may need to be addressed over the coming years. We've put them in a 0 to 12 month, a 1 to 5 year, 6 to 10, and 10 plus year category. You may hear me talk about short-term, mid-range, and long-term implementation strategies. This goes along with that. So in the next 12 months, roof maintenance, multi-purpose building, roof and gutter issues, and then there's a number of issues on the exterior envelope of the building. We've identified that somewhere in the $130,000 to $200,000 range for improvements. Over the next 5 years, potential input into the building of $2.9 to $3.6 million. Safety and security in your buildings. All of your buildings you can walk into without having to get access straight into the office. Most every school, from a safety and security standpoint that we are working with, is creating what's kind of called a Z trap. You can get into the first set of doors, but then you have to go into an office, check in, get a visitor badge, be identified before you can get access to the school at all. So that's something that's on that list. Code compliance, handicap accessibility. You have a locker room in the lower level and some other functions down there that are not handicap accessible. Some of your bathrooms here are not handicap accessible, and there are some parking related and sidewalk issues related to that accessibility. Ongoing HVAC maintenance and upgrades. You do have a geothermal system here, which is a great system. You've done a good job updating all of the heat pumps as a part of that process. So continuing that component with a 2005 geothermal system. You're 15 years old, 16 years old now on that. As that system approaches 20 years old, you'll start seeing some additional maintenance and some additional replacements that need to be done. Consider a new roof, removing the ballasted area and a fully adhered TPO roof. There's some exit stair upgrades, possibly some gym upgrades and lights here. You may, as you get into some of these projects, encounter some additional hazardous materials that need to be abated. I have not seen a report on this school. I'm certain when that addition was done in 2005 that a bunch of that was taken care of, but there's always those pieces that you may not see or may not be uncovered. In the next 6 to 10 years, classroom upgrades, your South classroom or the original piece over here, continuing those updates, technology upgrades. Your teachers are always going to say, we don't have enough outlets. We don't have the right Wi-Fi connectivity, particularly as you get more and more technology heavy in all of your instruction. Even COVID, I think, has shown us the additional need for technology in the classroom, distance learning, online learning, those sorts of things. I've identified some program issues where maybe you're not capturing the space within this building that maybe you could. There's some better uses. We would certainly want to go through some of that with you. 10 plus years, again, energy efficiency upgrades throughout, ongoing heating and cooling. That's probably about a time where your windows are all going to need replaced. And then any other code related things that may come about. They're not required right now, but fire sprinklers, upgrades to your fire alarm system. I believe you do have a tornado shelter, but any upgrades that need to be addressed as a part of that with the state of Iowa. That's the elementary building here. Your high school building, 55,000 square feet, completed in 1967, with some additions along the way here in 2009, 1974. So again, we've identified similar components to give you an idea of what you may expect in your school buildings over the next 10 years. Again, $120,000 to around $600,000 in the 0 to 12 month time frame, depending on roof maintenance, if that's a full replacement or just a roof. Ventilation in the automotive shop, some HVAC issues in the gym over there, any type of mold issues that are around the high school, fixing bleachers at the high school. In the next 1 to 5 years, up to 2.1 million. Again, that's a safety and security piece where the entry into the school, you can gain access without having to go through an office. That's something you could choose Maybe we don't care about that in the East Mills Community School District here. It's working as it is now. We don't have any concerns. You can certainly push that down the road till you're doing another project. Code compliance, ADA accessibility. Again, as I mentioned in the past, those are things that you can continue to get away with until you can't. I think there was a question at one of the first meetings that was related to when do all schools have to meet handicap accessibility requirements? And a lot of that is based on the age of the facility. So any significant improvements you do now all have to meet current handicap codes. Any new building that you would build now has to meet handicap accessibility codes. But because of the age of your facilities, you have a little bit of leeway there. In other school districts we've worked with, it's been a state audit of a facility, or it's been a user or a teacher or a student that has actually needed access and filed a complaint. Then the school district has to go in and make some adjustments at that particular time. There would be some updating of the heating and cooling over there. We've talked with your facilities team a little bit about building management controls, how to be more efficient in your building from a heating and cooling standpoint and monitor those remotely. Over 6 to 10 years, then again, you have updated lighting. We would want to review the wrestling and weight room functions, updating of the gym lighting, and then technology upgrades again in that time period for that particular school. 10 plus years, you're going to be at a lot of significant changes in that particular building with new finishes, ceilings, kitchen equipment that's you're getting along, and you're getting to the end of life of kitchen equipment, energy efficiency with your heating and cooling, window replacement over there, and then again, the code related issues. So right now they're not, when I talk about fire sprinklers and fire alarms, that's not something that you have to do right now. If you get into a project where you're significantly changing your heating and cooling or any type of lighting upgrades, that's when the state fire marshal is going to come in and say, while you're above those ceilings and because of that level of work, now's the time that you need to make those changes to your fire sprinklers and your fire alarm systems. So we've scored the buildings. There's 4 categories that we look at. I don't have those categories on here, but each building scores around a 5. We look at site analysis, exterior, interior, and your mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and technology systems. So around a 5 is where you would expect buildings of this age to score in Iowa. It's nothing to get excited about because you're not a 10. A 10 is basically a brand new building, but that's just something to be aware of. If you want to go look at these slides, they are available on a website through the schools, a link through the schools site. You can get copies of the slides, read through all the descriptions. Prior presentations have the 4 categories broken out and the individual scoring on there also. We also look at your program. And so when I say your program, that is how you use your spaces. You will hear me talk about top-down looks at that and bottom up. So this chart right here is a top-down look at your program. And basically we look at your enrollment and a per square foot, per student ratio. And then that gives us an overall high level look at how you're utilizing your space. We do have some slides where we have broken down each individual space by square footage and by use, and that's called the bottom up method. So when we start getting into really detailed information on any program changes you want to make or any program deficiencies that you have, that's where we can start to figure out where those programs and pieces can be moved around. This particular slide, though, if you've been to the previous presentations, it shows you that, for example, here in the elementary building and the 73,000 square feet you have here, you have a capacity for 368 students and you have 224 attending this facility. Likewise, at your junior senior high building, you have a capacity for 278 and 223 students attending that particular facility. So you have more square footage than you need. One of the scenarios that we've thrown out there to get feedback on, one of these ideas to stimulate discussion, is a pre-K-12 all-in-one facility. So if we were to look at that, that's how you would maximize square footage based on enrollment. So for an example, we would take 500 students times 200 square feet. That shows us you would need approximately 100,000 square feet of a new pre-K 12 building in order as a baseline moving forward in any programming for you on that. You start to move those things, that number up and down, depending upon specific needs of your school district. Maybe you have a really strong ag program and you want twice the space, or career technical education, CTE, industrial arts, welding, those components take more space. Maybe you have a great performing arts program and you actually want a true auditorium and auditorium seats. Those are things that move that 100,000 square feet number up and down. So we've done the bottom up analysis and the top down on both of your school buildings. One of the other pieces we've looked at as questions have come through here is your enrollment trends. So you can see 10 years ago in the 2011-2012 school year, you had 501 students and 80 open enroll outs. Today, in the 2020-21 timeframe, you have 427 students enrolled in the East Mills district with 147 open enroll out. So you can see those lines are both going in the wrong direction. Open enroll is going up, student enrollment is going down. I'm having technical difficulties here with my clicker. Any questions on this so far? I'm going to let Matt jump in here and give you a little bit additional information on the financial piece and run through some scenarios with you all. Yeah. Did you?
You saw me maybe a month ago or so when I was here, so we're going to go over some of that same information, and there's a couple new things, but pretty much mostly the same information. Stop me if you have a question right in the middle of it. You're not going to hurt my feelings if you do that. I'm going to start talking about the handout that myself or Mr. Hood handed out to you. If you didn't get one and you want one, I think there are a couple extras. You can raise your hand and we can get one to you. We're going to begin on that first page that says at the top of it, comparison of historical district tax rate. So on that top section, the top box is showing you the difference between the historic Malvern district and the historic Mission Valley district. The total school tax levy rate going from 2012 to 2021. And you can see that in both cases, the overall school tax levy rate has declined significantly in the last 8 or 9 years. And then the one that's in the middle of that page is just showing the total school levy rate. This is for fiscal year 21, so that's this current fiscal year that we're just getting close to ending. That rate versus the other districts that are in this general area. And you can see, of course, in the shaded area that both Nishna Valley and Malvern are at the bottom there. The reason that there's a difference, for those of you that don't know or don't remember, is that when you combine the district, Nishna Valley had bonds, and the historic Nishna Valley property is still paying for those bonds, and you agreed that if you got married, which you did, that Malvern property would not pay the debt service on that. Those bonds will be paid off a year from now, so then the district will truly become one equal district where everybody's paying the exact same thing. So any type of bond levy that we might discuss tonight, and all of this is hypothetical, this is up to you guys eventually, depending on what you might choose to do, but any type of bond levy that we talk about would be implemented not at least until the following year. So it would be the first year that you would be coming together from a tax rate standpoint. So it would be equivalent to everybody at that time. But that also means that because Malvern folks have not been paying a debt service levy, and we go up to a potential new debt service levy, that it's going to be a bigger increase for those people. because the Nishna Valley people are already paying something, so it might be an increase to them, but it's a smaller increase versus the Malvern people. Don't mistake that for meaning that it's unfair. It's just that that's just putting everybody then back on an equal base, basically. And you'll see as we go through the rest of this packet that there's a potential that the increase in taxes could possibly be around $1.35, and that would be based on the Nishna Valley levy rate. So even if that were to happen, even if that's what the community decided to do, and you voted and accepted that, that tax rate as a total would probably still be between the Riverside and Shenandoah tax rate. So you'd still be quite a ways down the list, somewhere in that 13 to 1350 range, so significantly below Glenwood, Red Oak, Trainer, which doesn't mean it's okay, it doesn't mean it's good or bad. What one school pays and what another school pays there's different reasons for those types of things, but it's just an example to show you that there are others that are paying higher tax rates, and of course there are some that are paying lower. You see on that list two districts that aren't in your area. The lowest school district tax rate in the state is Remsen Union, that's up in northwest Iowa, but the reason they can have such a low rate is they don't have a high school. They share their high school, or they share with Marcus, Merritt, and Cleghorn, and they probably eventually will one day do what you've done, but they haven't done that yet. So they're not paying for a high school, they're just shipping their kids and shipping some of the tax money to that other district. And then the highest tax rate in the state currently is Perry, so $20.55, and they do have bonds outstanding as well, which is part of that high tax rate there. The bottom of that page, and I'm not sure if you guys have this on your slide, because I think we just created, I don't remember if we got it sent to you for the slide, but that shows the valuation of your districts by classes of property. And it doesn't necessarily mean anything, it's just really information for you. But you can see as a percentage that residential property in the entire district is about 28 to 29% of the property valuation paying taxes. And then ag land and ag buildings around 54%. And then the rest of it's made up of commercial property, railroad, those types of things. If we go to the page after that, or the back of that page, we come to the first bonding scenario. And as Derek said, just because I'm talking here tonight about a bond does not mean that there's going to be a bond. This is just information for you, and this will help you later through this process decide if you want to do something, and if something includes A, B, and C out of these lists that the architects have, then you'll have an idea of what could be afforded, so to speak, to fund those types of things. So in this particular page, I know this looks kind of confusing, there's lots of information here, but we first want to look at that big fat arrow that's pointing down in the middle of the page. And there you see a tax levy rate that's right around $2.70. So that's the maximum levy rate that every school district in Iowa can go to with a general obligation bond question and have one ballot question. And that question would ask basically, can the school borrow this much money to do this sort of thing? And the ballot will describe what that is. And under these assumptions that we're making here, so we're guessing at interest rates and we're guessing at your property valuation next year, because even if you were to vote later this fall, this winter, or next spring, if that were to happen, the bonds wouldn't be sold until about a year from now anyway. So we'd be using next year's property values, and we don't know what those values are. So we're making an assumption about that. And then as you see in the third from the left column, my guess of an average 2.75% interest. These are 20-year general obligation bonds. If you could issue these bonds today, or I should say, if you could have issued them this past Monday, I was at Comanche School District over on the Mississippi River, just kind of a suburb, so to speak, of Clinton. They issued bonds that look just like this, and their interest rate average was 1.87. So that doesn't mean that a year from now, if you were to issue bonds, you're going to get 1.87, because we don't know what's going to happen, right? Interest rates can rise, they can fall, they can stay steady. So I've assumed that they will rise some, and then maybe it could be 2.75. But if interest rates do stay low as they are today, and you truly proceeded with something like this, then either the tax levy would be lower than $2.70, because the interest component would be lower, or the school board could choose, instead of paying that debt off in 20 years, maybe they could squeeze it into an 18 or 12 or 13-year payment, whatever it might be, and still have that $2.70 levy. So it'd be sort of equivalent to choosing a 30-year mortgage versus a 15-year mortgage. You can eliminate lots of interest if you can pay the debt off more quickly. But most importantly, in this page on the bottom left corner, with this type of a bond proposal, you could generate around $14 million for project costs. Now, these worksheets aren't suggesting what that $14 million would pay for, and it wouldn't have to be $14 million. Obviously, this is just saying $14 million is the $2.70. If the community or the committee, the school board eventually decides that something lesser is needed or wanted, obviously it could be a smaller amount. These we're talking about are the maximum numbers. Then if you go to the next page, and again, you look under that fat arrow, you see that now the levy rate has jumped to $4.05, or very close to that. So that's the maximum rate that a school district can go to in Iowa. And if the school needs, the amount that the school needs to borrow requires a tax levy above $2.70, but not above $4.05, they can do that, but they have to ask you a second question on the ballot. It also requires 60% approval. So the first question is still, can the district borrow this much money to do this thing? But then that special second question is, can the school tax you at a higher tax levy rate, up to $4.05, or whatever the number that the district needs? So you'd have to say yes to both of those questions. But in this example, in the bottom left, you can see that you could generate a significantly larger amount of money, $21 to $22 million. And even though the bond would require a $4.05 levy, at least initially, of course, as your property value grows, and it doesn't always grow, but over a 20-year period of time, it's going to grow. If you had a $4 tax levy, just as an example, and your property value doubled overnight, which that's not going to happen, but this is hypothetical. If it doubled overnight, the levy rate would drop to $2. It would go from $4 to $2 because there's twice as much property value to generate the same amount of taxation that's needed to generate that payment. So over time, the tax levy rate will very likely drop, but it begins at about $4.05. But now I want you to look at that far column, or the far box, because the district has the ability, at least for some time, to make adjustments to other levies that they levy. There are cash reserve levies, there are management fund levies, and there are income surtax levies, and manipulating those, adjusting them up or down, has the impact potentially of lowering the tax rate overall. And they can also use sales tax, which they generate statewide, and they could use PEPAL monies as well to offset, or what we call abate, the bond levy, or help pay it down, so to speak. So there are various options that the school board has, and they believe that they could, and I agree with them, that they could probably adjust the levy even on the $4.05 proposal to where it's still netting from you $2.70, which is what the first one suggested. So you could possibly get $21 to $22 million, still be paying a net increase of $2.70. But even the $2.70 is only a $2.70 raise, remember, to the Malvern people, and to the Nishnah Valley people, it's about $1.35. For those of you that are in Nishnah Valley, you're already paying about $1.35. So then we go to the last two pages, and we see, what does that mean to you if the school district were to raise your taxes? And this could be for any reason. I'm talking about a bond, but it could be for any reason that the school district needed to raise your tax. And as far as that goes, it could be the city, and it could be the county, it could be the community college. Any municipality that you live within their district, they could raise taxes if they have a legitimate need for it. And this worksheet, it works exactly the same, no matter who it is. And it works the same no matter where you live in the state of Iowa. So I live in Urbandale, you guys live here in the district in East Mills. If my school district is gonna raise my taxes by $1.35 and your school district is gonna raise your taxes by $1.35, the calculations are exactly the same. The only thing that's different is the value of my property versus the value of your property. If my property is more valuable, then if you multiply the tax times the higher value property, I'm gonna pay more out of my pocket. Or if my property is less valuable, it's gonna cost me less out of my pocket. But the mathematical calculation is exactly the same. So we'll start here real quickly with the Nishnah Valley, and then we'll look at the other side, which is identical, just different tax rate. So again, if you were to choose to proceed with something that requires a bond issue, and if you chose to do something that the school board could contain the tax levy at about $1.35 for the Nishnah Valley people, you can see here the residential property value, the top section. And most people don't understand how to do this calculation, even though it's really, really easy. And you'll see that it's really easy. And you'll probably love to now start calculating your property taxes. It is not something that requires you to be a mathematician or a scientist or a rocket scientist. Your kids can do this calculation, or my kids, I have fourth grade kids, they can do this calculating taxes with a pencil and paper. You don't even need a calculator. It really is that simple. But we've done the math for you here. So I'm going to use a $100,000 home as the example up there. This is the assessed value of that home, not the market value, the assessed value. You may disagree with the assessed value, and you probably just received the new assessment from the county assessor. You can agree with it all day long, but whatever the county assessor says is what it is. And you can dispute it, and you can sometimes win, but my point is, at the end of the day, whatever that assessed value is what's going to be used, not what you dream up or what you hope it would be, etc. So that $100,000 home, many people would assume that if the school or city or county was going to raise their taxes by $1.35 per $1,000, we're always talking about $1,000 increments or mills, that $100,000 home would require a $135 increase, 100 times the $1.35. And while that sounds completely logical, it is not right, because we have something that's very not logical in Iowa called rollback. And you see that on this worksheet. So in the upcoming fiscal year that begins July 1, those of us that own residential property in the community, in the state, which is the homes in the towns, but it's also the farmhouses and the acreages out in the country. But in those places out in the country, it's not the entire property. It's a smaller portion of the property that the home sits on. So if you own 50 acres out in the country, you're paying probably agricultural taxes on a big portion of that, and then the residential tax on maybe an acre or something like that, whatever the assessor decides. But next year, you'll be paying tax on 56.4% of the value. And if it's your primary residence, so that would be not a second home or a lake home or a vacation home or rental property that you might own, but your primary residence, you probably have claimed homestead credit. So that knocks off some value before taxation is applied. So you see that that $100,000 home is going to be taxed at $51,559. So that's 51.599, talking about $1,000 increments, times the $1.35 is about $69 a year, or about $5.80 per month, if the municipality, in this case the school district, was going to raise your taxes by $1.35 for whatever the reason. So remember that this $1.35 could possibly bring the district $21 million. Now that doesn't mean they need 21 million. That's for you guys to decide that. And I don't have an opinion about that either. I don't know if they need 12 million, 15 million, 2 million, 20 million. That's what this group is about, make those decisions. But if that were to happen, that bond might cost that person that owns a $100,000 home about $69 a year. And the point of this worksheet is to stress that it's $69, not $135. Because there are people that would miscalculate it, and if they think that $135 is too much, and that's their prerogative, it may be too much for those people. But if that's what causes them to vote against it, if they truly knew the truth and it was $69 and they felt that was affordable to them, then we want them to be able to support the project. Again, if it's a valid project and we think it's necessary to know that they're going to pay a smaller tax than what they expected. Commercial property, you see there is similar, but they only get a 10% reduction. But then you see ag values. So a lot of you in the room are ag landowners. And this is where the difference between assumptions and reality are very, very different. So you see a number in bold, $1,553. And in the box below that, that tells you that that is the average assessed value of 1 acre of ag land in Mills County last year. Not 6,000 or 4,000 or 8,000 or whatever the market value of that land is, but the assessed value, 1,553. And there's a rollback on the ag land as well. It's 84% next year, next fiscal year. So that $1,500 land is going to be taxed at $1,305. It's 1.305 thousands times the $1.35, about $1.76 per acre per year, or about 15 cents per acre per month. And then if you went down to the box at the very bottom, you can see various numbers of acres that a person might own. 320 acres as the example I typically choose. I think that's sort of a family-ish farm these days. That might be about $563 per year to bring the school district potentially $21 million. Now again, the difference between this worksheet, which is reality, and the not reality, is if that person thought that they could sell their land for $5,000 an acre, as an example, the market value, and instead they took 5 times $1.35, so they got $6.20, whatever that is, instead of $1.76 per acre, and you took $6.20 times the 320 acres, you come up with an enormous tax increase. And that would scare you, and it would scare me too. I would vote no to that, to be honest. But that's not true. This is the way the tax is calculated. Now, this is not to say, and I'm not here to say, that if you own 320 acres and your taxes are going to go by $563 a year, I'm not going to tell you that you should just accept that, or that that's good, that you can afford that. That's for you to decide. But I want you to know it's $560. It's not $5,000 a year or $7,000 a year. So you need to do the calculation correctly there. And then the next page, which is the last page, again, is the same thing, but of course it's the $2.70, which still, remember, could be the $4.05 bond, because the school district could probably adjust some other levies to get the $4.05 down to the $2.70. This is for the Malvern property, because they haven't been paying a debt service on a bond this time while you've been married, but Mission Valley has been. So obviously the increase for the Malvern people is more significant. And again, that's not to say that it's less fair. It's just that you are finally now together as one, so everything will proceed in the future with everyone being equal. So any questions about what you see there on those worksheets for the bond process? Mr. Hood, is there anything that you wanted me to talk about that I didn't talk about?
I don't think off the top of my head, no.
Any questions from you all or from the Zoom folks? Okay, I'll hang out here so that when the real question and answers come, you can still ask.
Schools sometimes is we calculate that 10-year average, because you are paying your, as that chart showed, your levy rate has gone down every single year. And so a jump from a low level at this year to something that included property tax referendum or a bond, that jump is immediately seen. But if you calculated out your average, where you've been up there higher over the past 10 years, that increment is less. Another chart that I like to show here is related to construction costs. So for example, right now, as Matt mentioned, interest rates are incredibly cheap. So that means any money that is bonded for. More of that is going towards the facilities and the education of your students as opposed to interest. Construction costs are similar in that it's never going to get cheaper to build something. This chart, for example, shows you the past 10 years of construction plus some projections moving forward based on that past 10 years. So if we took 2019 as our baseline, because that's the last real year we have of construction data that wasn't kind of this fluctuation up and down with COVID pricing and everything. And if we took a project that was $10 million in 2019, that same project in 2011 was $7.2 million. Likewise, moving forward, that $10 million project from 2019 in 2025, it'd be $12.3 million. So that's showing you that construction, we just are never going to get to a point where construction dollars are going to go down. We have previously to 2011 there, we saw a couple of years that had some major cost corrections, close to 20%. And those are things that we don't like to see happen in construction. It makes it difficult for us to help you facilitate a project. But we believe that we're in a trend like that chart shows you there based on the past 10 years. All right, I want to talk to you a little bit about the results from the last community engagement meeting. So if you were at this last facilities meeting over at the junior senior high building, first question we asked was where you were from. So this is the chart that shows that. 24 from Malvern, 1 from Hastings, 8 from Emerson, 2 from Henderson, then 23 people that identified as rural and not associated with a community. One question that we get consistently is how many people voted at the meeting, how many people voted or looked at this and gave a response after the meeting. Say they saw it online, they watched the presentation and then answered the survey online. There were 13 people that responded after that meeting. There were 45 people at the meeting for a total of 58. Another question that we get is, how do you keep Mr. Hood from getting online and answering that question, that survey 10 different times? I'm just picking on Mr. Hood as an example. It could be any of you out there. The response is that we have that locked down as much as we can so that you can respond one time. I'm not going to tell you how to cheat that, but pretty much any high school kid out there is going to know how to go figure out how to cheat that if they want to. But for the most part, we're not seeing multiple responses from the same exact location back to back to back to back when we do these, and we can track that way. The question on in establishing objectives for this process, can you agree with an East Mills first approach? 55 yes, 2 in the no. We did ask some people to respond to that, why they chose yes on that. I'm not going to read through every one of these responses. If you want to see those, I would suggest you go to the website, download the presentation, and you can read through those responses on why you voted yes or no on an East Mills first approach. In establishing objectives, can you agree that providing the best education possible for the students of East Mills should be number 1? Again, 53 yes, 1 no. In seeing the open and roll out numbers, what factor do you think plays most in the decision for students attending another district? Again, this is a very subjective question. We're asking most all of you who attend this district or have students that attend here or family, why you think somebody else is open enrolling out to another school district. The first answer was the educational environment, the learning spaces being outdated. The second was the quality of education. The third is the condition of the activities environments. The fourth is the location of the elementary building. Fifth, strength of activities. Sixth, lack of early childhood and daycare programs. And then seventh, the location of the high school. We asked, how important is the location of the school facility or facilities in your decision to support efforts to improve the district's education of its students? So this was on a 1 to 5 scale, and you could drag that to a 1, 2, 3, or a 5. You can see the way that chart dips, and location does not matter. There was a lot of people that put a 1, and then on the other end, there was a lot of people that put a 5. There was not a lot of response right down the middle. We must maintain 2 locations as we currently have. Again, a lot in the 1, in the strongly disagree, a lot right down the middle, and then it kind of tapered off. The entire pre-K-12 school should be located in Malvern. Again, a little bit of a steady in the middle, and then more responses at the strongly agree piece. The entire pre-K-12 should be located at the elementary site. A lot of responses towards the strongly disagree, and then it levels off as you move forward. So that's just a chart. Again, another way to ask questions and gather opinions and thoughts on what we're trying to do here with this process. If we had a crystal ball and 10 years from now, East Mills needs to reduce to 1 campus to maintain quality education, where should that be? 31 responses for Malvern, 20 for here in the elementary site, and 4 for somewhere not yet discussed. How likely would you support a property tax referendum to improve the East Mills School District and the education of its students? This is encouraging. 40 people are said highly likely, 6 very unlikely, and 9 undecided. So again, this was not tied to a specific solution, but just a generic question on, are you willing to support that moving forward? How likely would you support a property tax referendum that only improved the junior senior high building? Again, very split between highly likely and very unlikely, with 13 undecided. How likely would you support a property tax referendum that located pre-K-12 to Malvern only? 33 highly likely, 15 very unlikely, and 7 undecided. Same question with pre-K-12 at the elementary site. 19 highly likely, 27 very unlikely, and 9 undecided. Of the 4 options presented there, which was renovate both schools, flip schools, relocate to the elementary building, or relocate to the Malvern site, what do you feel is the best solution? 26 responses to relocate to the Malvern site and 20 to renovate both schools, followed by relocate to the elementary school site, and then 0 on the flip schools. Of the 4 options presented, B, C, D, and E, which do you feel should be eliminated? 20 on the flip schools, 17 to relocate pre-K-12 to the elementary, then followed by the relocate to the Malvern site, and then followed by renovate both schools. We did get a number of comments. A lot of people have opinions on this. There's a lot of passion. There's a lot of direction and thoughts moving forward. I am not going to read every one of these comments. I would encourage you to get up here and download this PDF and go ahead and go through those comments yourself. So what does this all mean? Lots of information, lots of questions, lots of responses that don't give us a clear picture quite yet. I am encouraged that generally the East Mills community supports improving the school facilities, and in general has said they would support financially moving forward with improving of the facilities. It just depends on what is that solution. The East Mills community does not want to just maintain the status quo. So we've seen thrown out previously that nobody wants to just keep going as we're going, doing a little bit of the maintenance here, deferring some maintenance, and just keep going. So we've seen that option thrown out. While most everyone understands that one pre-K-12 building is the most efficient to operate, there is a strong desire to still maintain the 2 campuses in their current locations and maximize existing square footage. That is a trend that we are seeing as we move forward here. There is a strong desire to move forward with an East Mills first approach, enhance community pride in the schools, and move forward with a community-based solution. As we talk about, the East Mills community generally supports moving forward with improvements that enhance and improve the educational environments. We have a couple of charts here that were shown previously that show you where you were at financially from the presentation that Matt just gave you, what a potential tax impact would be, and then also the slide when we asked that question, the overwhelming support that you would support something financially. The East Mills community does not want to just maintain the status quo. There's a desire for better facilities to compete with surrounding districts, reverse the declining enrollment trend, and reverse the open enrollment trend. It's not, we can't argue with the facts that the enrollment has gone down and the open enrollment has gone up, and we need to do some things to improve upon that. While most everyone understands that one pre-K-12 building is the most efficient to operate, there is still a desire to maintain a 2-campus scenario in their current locations and maximize this existing square footage. I just want to repeat, from the top down, taking every other piece out of it, with a school district of your size, the most efficient way to operate that school district is one pre-K-12 building. There's no way to argue against that. One building to maintain, one lunchroom, one destination for transportation, the efficiencies between sharing of teachers and paras, custodial staff, all of that, that is the most efficient way to operate a school. Now, I understand completely that that's not where we're at. That's not where you've been at. But that is, I just want to make sure we understand that piece. And when we talk about that, we're looking at the black and white from the top down. The current program use does not maximize the existing square footage in your building. So I showed you the chart that showed more square footage in each building than you actually have students in the buildings. There's lost education time for any teachers or students that travel between the campuses. Multiple buildings means more exterior to maintain, roof to maintain, heating and cooling to maintain, all of those components. However, there is room to grow. If you continue want to maintain both of these campuses, if all of the predictions on availability of jobs in the Omaha Metro continue to be true versus the amount of housing that the Omaha Metro can provide, if all of the plans for new housing around Mills County becomes a reality, there is room to grow. If students are open enrolling out or choosing not to even come here in the first place because of the facilities and the condition of the facilities, new facilities will certainly help reverse that trend. I just want to note that neither school's campus is at a deficit for potential growth. There is not one school building or campus that rises above the other that makes a decision on how to move forward easy. Both schools are similar in age, similar square footage, similar condition, and have great land around them to be able to do whatever you want to do in the future. There is a strong desire to move forward with an East Mills first approach, enhance community pride in the schools, and move forward with a community-based solution. There is a want for more community pride in the school district amongst all of the communities that it serves. There is facilities fatigue. I sense that, and I know from conversations that you guys have talked about facilities a lot since you became East Mills Community School District. And you may be at a point where let's just do something or do nothing. Let's just quit talking about facilities. There's a desire to heal and move past any past issues and move forward and show surrounding school districts that East Mills schools are united. There's a desire for childcare in the Malvern area to address open enroll out concerns. The comment that I see regularly in these is parents driving west to jobs in Omaha and wanting that childcare solution right there where it's convenient for them, so that those kiddos get into your school system right away at an early age, and they don't go somewhere else and then try to come back. There's new housing options in Mills County. I've heard of that over and over and over, of the amount of housing that is going to be built in Mills County. COVID, if we look at the past year, COVID has altered your live work perceptions. It's now easier to choose where to live, where you want to send your kids to school, and work remotely. So that is a positive towards your East Mills School District, in that you can choose to live here. You can work for Facebook out of Austin, Texas, and send your kids to that small school. And I just want to reiterate, there's some planning studies out there that suggest that in the Omaha Metro, by 2030, there's going to be more jobs than there is housing. And so that also supports growth this direction. Glenwood is built. The next logical step is to keep moving east here along Highway 34. So there's no doubt that housing is going to continue to be built this direction. Some additional things that we're going to do. We're going to present you some new options tonight. We're going to talk about those options. We're going to explain them a little more than we did at the last meeting. We're going to ask you to participate in that survey. We also are going to do a similar survey where we're going to email it out to all of the teachers and the staff in the East Mills School District to help gather some input on priorities, needs over wants. And we're going to do a very similar one then also for the students, so that we can see community, teachers, students kind of side by side. We've done that with some other school districts, and it helps everybody understand getting on the same page moving forward. Any questions before we jump into these ideas to stimulate discussion and these new concepts here tonight? All right. We have 4 options again tonight to look at. They are very similar to what we've presented previously. I'm going to explain them just a little bit more. As we look at the survey results, it's not hard to see that there is still a lot of fluctuation amongst what solution may prove to be the best solution moving forward. So option B, renovate and update all schools. Students remain in the existing facilities and their existing configurations. This isn't rethinking any of the educational environments. It's looking at those lists of all of the things we may predict, that we are predicting over the next 10 years that you have costs associated with. We're capturing all of those in one project to be efficient. But this building stays a K6, pre-K6, and you have your junior, senior high building, and that stays in that configuration. Not capturing any 21st century educational environments, any of those improvements. We're just fixing what we have. Option C, you're saying, Derek, why did you bring back option C, which is flip the schools? It's because I don't think that I fully explained this one enough, even though everybody voted it way down. I didn't get one vote for this option at the last meeting. So we see written concerns and written comments. We see people voting different things in the balancing aspirations and the things that are hot buttons, priorities, desires amongst the community. Nobody wants to continue to see enrollment declining and open enrollments going out, right? Constantly we're constantly hearing that parents are taking their kids west because it's easy for them to drop them off in Glenwood. I don't know if anybody from Glenwood is here, or if there's anybody that takes their kids to Glenwood. But the reality is, if you live, say, in Malvern or somewhere between this elementary school here in Malvern and you work in Omaha, it's going to be convenient for you to find a daycare that direction, drop your kids off there. I know from being from Red Oak that we had a similar issue about 5 years ago or so when they started their planning process. There was a lot, the kindergarten enrollment started to go down, and it was identified that there were a lot of kids going to daycares in other schools. Stanton had a great daycare. Stanton had something like 100 kids enrolled in their daycare program, of which less than 15% were Stanton kids, and it was from all sorts of communities all around them. And they had no problems putting those purple Viking t-shirts on those Red Oak kids and shoving them straight into their school system because it was easy. Those kids made friends, parents got to know each other. That is an important trend to reverse. And if that is part of your 140 open and roll out students, or if that is a reason that people are choosing not to move to any of the communities in your school district, you need to consider what an elementary building west with a daycare would mean in this solution. So that's why I've brought back the flip the schools scenario. This school here with 73,000 square feet could be set up as a high school very easily. The gym is not a competition gym. That is something we'd have to address. There's a lot of other little pieces like that that we'd have to address. High school kids drive generally. So driving to a building here like this would make sense from that scenario. Any questions on that? That's why I brought this back, because we need to consider why those open enrolls are going out, and that, you know, and those kiddos entering school and preschool and daycare early on, that is a factor as a parent that is possibly keeping that enrollment from going up and those open enrolls going out. So that's option C, flip the schools. Option D, a pre-K-12 at the elementary site. So I'm also going to explain this option D and option E a little bit more. You can see that tonight we've put some phases on these diagrams. And again, these are high-level looks at plans. But what I want you to understand is that even if you did option B or option C, that eventually you could get to option D or E. It's a lot of letters right there. You have the space to be able to do the renovations and accommodate the students. If at some point in 20 years, you need to make a decision of getting to, this is that crystal ball question, and Matt's asked that before too. If we had a crystal ball, where would we be? And I asked that question last time. If we had a crystal ball and you had to go to one campus, where would it be? So doing these renovations in option D is set up in our option C and our option B, so that as you move forward, that in the future you could get to a pre-K-12 at either site. So what I'm saying, what I mean with that is if option C or D becomes your master plan, but we need to implement option B or option C to get us towards that master plan or to give you some safety, that's what we can do. The other thing that it does is if you have twice as many people move to this county, twice as many students in your buildings and in your school district, it gives you the ability to expand both buildings later on in the future. Option C, option D is a pre-K-12 here at the elementary site. And option E is a pre-K-12 at the Malvern site. And again, you see that the different green boxes are classroom additions where you can have classrooms, additional gyms and activity space, secure entries, administration space, and how that those could come online at different points. One thing that Allie Pointer-Marketo is really, really, really good at is complicated projects, complicated renovations, complicated phasing. You add on top of this that you can't just close down your school building for a year while someone comes in and does construction. We understand all of those issues and how that plays into actually constructing schools and renovating schools. Any questions on the options before we jump to the survey? So we are going to ask you to use your smartphone again. If you need a hard copy, raise your hand. It might be yes. Here's the hard copies and some pens. Just take the bag, that's fine. Am I on? want to talk about schedule just a little bit. I want to emphasize that, we'll do this process as long as it takes to help you all as a community and as a school district figure out what your best solution is moving forward. With that said, you can't just decide, hey, we like this solution, we need to have a bond election. The state tells you when you can have those elections every year. This chart shows, for example, if we were to wrap up any of this community engagement and facilities discussion by the end of June, that you could potentially hit a September bond issue election date. We would need to back up from that September date to make sure that the school board has enough time to do all of their appropriate actions, to collect signatures, to call for that election. So that's why we would want to wrap that up around the end of June. If that is not realistic, there is also an option to do an election in November of this coming year also. If we do not feel we've got the support moving forward, the next date after that would be March. It's important to know that the state sets these rules, and if you run an election and it fails, you have to wait 6 months. So logic would tell you if you run an election in September and it fails, then that you could regroup and potentially do another one in March. However, the state has strategically set those election dates so that you're off by 6 months by about a week. So your true next election date, if you had one fail in September, would be a year from then. So the following September. So it's important to make sure that we get this right, that we're getting the appropriate cross-section of community members to these meetings, that the information is getting out there, whether that's social media, discussion at the coffee shops, discussion at the feed store, wherever that discussion happens, discussion with family members about what's going on. I'd say we should have more people at these meetings. We've got 35 or 36 responses on the survey tonight, and we really need more participation in order to help that facilities committee and that school board make sure that they're getting all of the information out there. So if you know someone who hasn't attended a meeting and is curious about what's going on, or maybe they aren't able to make meetings on Wednesday nights, please make sure you let them know that they can go to the school's website, click on facilities project, and it takes them to another linked website that we have built that has copies and videos of every one of these presentations we've done. It has copies of the slideshows that we do. And then it also has a link that's active for about 2 weeks after every one of these meetings. So someone can look at the slides, watch the video, take that same survey so we can get those additional responses. So that if you want to go to this site directly, it's sites.google.com/view/East-Mills. Again, the easy way to do it is to go to the East Mills School site, click on facilities. There's even a note posted on there today about this community engagement meeting, a link to the Zoom piece of it. So if you weren't able to attend in person, you could attend online. And then also within usually about 24 hours, Daniel's been pretty good about getting those Zoom recordings uploaded to the website so you can see what's going on. Social media, talk about it, talk about it, talk about it. That's the only way we're going to get everyone to come to a consensus on how to move forward. There is another community engagement meeting set for May 12th and then one for June 2nd. It'd be great to see more people. I do appreciate everybody who's come to these meetings and keeps coming to these meetings. But if you have any ideas on avenues that we need to use to reach out to get more people to come to these meetings, please let us know. Please let Mr. Hood know, any of your administrators, school board, all of them. Are there any questions on what we presented tonight, the surveys, thoughts?
Are there any questions on Zoom?
Not yet.
Okay. Yes.
Can I speak a little bit to why this is all being done from the board's view?
Sure. Are you switched over
Yeah,
on the mic?
switch.
You bet.
Hi, I'm Jan Sanders, and I've been on the board for, this is my 5th year, and it's quite the privilege to serve these mills. I thought maybe a little historical as to why we're bringing this forth, as to why we're looking at the facilities once again during this timeline might be helpful. When I first got on the board, I believe we had already been through a facilities discussion. And at that time, nothing was decided. We talked about it in our board meetings. We talked about the open roll out. And we looked at it long-term as to how can we address this. One of the issues was there was some division, there was some healing, there was some getting to know, and that we knew that would take time. Also, there was some misconceptions. There was concerns about the education of East Mills. So we took time to actually ramp up, drill down, and improve our test scores, and they have been improved. And I must give huge kudos to our staff. They really work hard, and we have the data to support that education here is comparable to anybody else around us. And I give them the credit. We also looked at trying to marry this district together financially, because as you have seen, the Initiative Valley side had the bond to pay off, the Malvern not so much. And so we thought it would be important before we started down the path of any more bond issues, possible any bond issues, that we were on the same ground financially. So we worked towards that goal as well. So all these things kind of came together. We still knew that the buildings needed some love, both buildings. I mean, I'm eternally grateful that 1960 buildings are still being used, but they are approaching, they do need some love. They do need some updates. We know that money, interest is very low right now. We know that construction costs are never going to get cheaper. So we are bringing it forth to you once again. It's in your hands, the board. We don't know. We don't want to make that type of decision. We want a community decision. And whatever it comes down to, 60% of you have to agree. So that's one of the, that's kind of a little history of why we are bringing it to you again. We'll accept whatever you decide, but we need to generate buzz. Talk about it. We need more people. There's 2,400 people voting patrons in this district. We've had under 200, and the number is probably less than that. So it's like 8% have been participating. We need more. So talk about it. If anybody has questions, let us know. We'll talk. As a board member, I'll talk. Look at me now, I'm up here talking. So please help us pay it forward for the kids in the next generation, for our communities. The Initiative Valley School District and the Malvern School District has blessed this area for a number of years. And I know the passion within you will also make it continue for many more. So talk about it, get the message out. If you have any questions, ask anybody. We will help you out any way we can. But that's why we're bringing it in front of you one more time. And if you tell us to be quiet about it, okay. Thank you.
If there are no other questions, I'll stick around after the meeting if you want to come up and ask us anything that you don't want to be brave like Jan and stand up and talk in front of everybody. Just, are there any other, anybody else? No, okay. Thank you all for coming. Hope to see you at the next meeting.
Those of you that have the paper copies,